Carry on recording. Okay, clear all drawings. All right, but the problem with these books is, as I say, that they're empty calories. They don't give you much by way of tachlis, and this is something that kind of bothers me. That it seems like a bit of a waste of time. So you would think, okay, so what about Jewish fiction? I mean, there should be some good Jewish film fiction around it that's got a good story and nonetheless has got a solid message behind it, or something that you can learn, or something that you can grow from. Hands up, anyone there, if you've ever read any Jewish fiction, or put something in the comments. In the chat. Anyone read anything in any Jewish fiction? Okay, well, if anyone has read any Jewish fiction, then you may have seen what kind of quality it is. Yeah, that kind of sums it up. It's a mix of dreary, prosaic, mawkish, humorless with cardboard characters and frankly mediocre prose. Maybe one or two. I've read one or two Jewish fictions that are okay. And so enter my wife, who came in one day and found me reading yet another Harry Potter for the umpteenth time. And she said, "Why do you keep reading that rubbish?" And I said, "Because there's nothing good in the Jewish world. What am I supposed to read?" So she said, "So do something about it." So I said, "Okay." And that then became my challenge. To write fiction that's both entertaining and carries some serious content payload. That became my challenge, and I took this challenge to an idea that I'd been thinking about for a long time already, which is the idea of the free will paradox. So let's just get into the free will paradox for a minute and explain it for those who haven't yet encountered the idea. The free will basically is at the core of, I think, every religion. This is the reason being because most religions that I'm aware of have a concept of reward and punishment. And for somebody to be rewarded or punished for their actions, there has to be a meaningful choice between good and evil. Okay, and it's difficult to say that you should get a reward if your good choices are meaningless. You have to have a real choice. But there's a fundamental problem with this. Okay, that is that if God knows everything, which we say that God does, because God is infinite and God is omniscient, we say he knows everything, then he also already knows what our choices are going to be. Oh, is my sound a little choppy? So leave the door open maybe. Okay. So if God already knows what our choices are going to be, then that limits our free will. So we don't have, so in that case, we don't in truth have the ability to make free choices. And this is basically the free will paradox, which has been debated throughout the ages. I see a comment over here that Michael Burstein has written a lot. I've actually been in touch with him. That's correct. And although while he is a frum writer, his writing is not actually written from a religious perspective. And Rafael Perkel says excellent historical novels by Avner Gold. Okay, so I should take a look at that because I haven't ever seen Avner Gold, and I will have to take advantage of those things. Okay, and on Venus Have We Got a Rabbi? Oh, I saw that. I saw On Venus Have We Got a Rabbi. That was a famous one. Although it wasn't a from. It was a Jewish one, but it wasn't from. Yeah, I did read that. Okay. Anyway, so I enjoy the interactivity. Sorry if I get a little bit ADHD while I'm doing it, but at least I feel like there's somebody in the room with me, even though I'm the only one who's talking. All right. So the free will paradox. I hope you've got. If there are any further questions about the free will paradox, you're welcome to ask. But basically, it's something that's been debated throughout the ages, and lots of different philosophers have given ideas as to how to resolve it. I'm not going to go through what other people have said. It's my turn. Okay, I've got my own idea that I'm going to propose over here, and we're going to work with that tonight. So in order to resolve this, we're going to start with some background Kabbalah. And just our starting point is with a gentleman called Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. This is Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who wrote a famous book called Derech Hashem. And just like almost every other book of Kabbalah in existence, he opens up with the question of, why did God create the universe? Okay, that's a fundamental question that Kabbalah books ask, is why did God create the universe? And almost uniformly, they give the same answer. Why? Because God existed before the universe, and God is the prime cause of everything. And God is fundamentally good. But one of the definitions of good is that in order to be good, you've got to be able to do good to another. Okay? So therefore, God has to create human beings. We'll cut to the chase over here. The creature that he creates is the human being, and God wants to do good to people. Okay, but it's not just any good. It's not just like he'll create a human being and just shine good on him and give him good, and that'll be the end of the story. Rather, what? It can't just be any good, but it's got to be the best possible good, and that has to be earned. Why? Because earning good is an earned good is something that is more pleasurable than something that's given away for free. There's a certain amount of embarrassment if you receive something for free, but when you've earned it and it's a part of you, you feel a much greater satisfaction in what it is that you have received. Okay, so therefore God created humans with free choice, that they could earn their reward. Which gives them, of course, the ability to choose either good or evil, and that's our idea of free choice. This world over here, God conceals himself and enables us to make free choices. If God did not conceal himself, we wouldn't have a realistic free choice. It would be the equivalent of standing right under the policeman's nose and smashing the window and stealing stuff. You're just not going to get away with it. There's no way it's gonna work. So therefore, we have this world is the world where God Hashem conceals himself. And where it's possible to earn the reward, and in the next world after this life is what's called the world to come, which is the world of reward. Okay, that's a bit of background Kabbalah. So now that we've learned this fundamental point over here, that the reason why God created us is to do good to us, and to do is because God wants to do good to somebody else. I'm going to give you a bonus question. Okay, and that is another puzzle to solve. If God is infinite, with infinite capacity to do good, then if he had created just one person to do good to him, would that have been sufficient? If he just created Adam and said, okay, that's it, you've earned your reward, well done, and that's the end, would that have been sufficient for God's need to do good? And I think we'll say, well, no. I mean, that's just one person. Well, how could all of God's good just for one person? That seems a little bit setting the bar low. So what about 10 or 100 or 1,000,000? Well, we're still dealing with finite numbers relative to an infinite God. So therefore, let's push it up to every human who's ever lived. If every human who's ever lived gets a reward, even that we're talking about, okay, 10 billion, 100 billion, maybe a trillion people who've ever lived. But nonetheless, these are just small numbers compared to an infinite God who has infinite capacity to do good. So we're going to hold that thought just for a moment, okay? And then we're going to pick up some more clues from some other stories. So we've got two puzzles that we want to solve. One is the puzzle of the paradox of free will. And another one that we're going to solve is, how is it that if God wants to do good to people, that he can suffice with just the sum total of every human being who's ever lived? Okay, so let's pick up some clues. Let me introduce you to a very great person whose name was Reb ZUSHA of Annapolis. Okay, you can see he looks like a holy guy, and Reb ZUSHA was a Hasidic master, and he had many students, and he was filled with good deeds all his life. And when he came to his deathbed, he was lying on his deathbed and crying in fear of judgment in the next world. And his students said, "Come on, Rebbe, let's get real over here. You're Reb ZUSHA, and how can you possibly be worried about what's going to be with you in the next world?" And he said, "Oh, that I should be Reb ZUSHA." He said, I'm crying not because I'm afraid that they're going to say to me, "Why didn't you live up to the level Abraham? Why didn't you live up to the level of Isaac? Why didn't you live up to the level of Moshe, of David, all these great people in history? But what they will do is they will ask me, why weren't you ZUSHA? Why didn't you live up to who you could have been? That was the question that scared Reb ZUSHA so much. So let's think about that in a little bit more depth. Why weren't you ZUSHA? So we learn from this, well, I mean, this is already known, that after 120 years in this world, we all come before the heavenly court, and have a judgment is passed on us on how we spent our time in this world. So from Reb ZUSHA's words, we understand that the heavenly court holds us to the standard of what we could have been. Okay, and the logical inference from that is that the heavenly court knows what we could have been. So they hold up this image of, there is Reb ZUSHA. Reb ZUSHA is what you could have been. And on the other end is some lowly person. I mean, I'm using Reb ZUSHA as an example of somebody incredible, but let's just say it's some nasty person who at the end of his life, who's the most horrible, disgusting, imaginable person who could have been, who finally goes up to stand in front of the heavenly court. Well, here he is. Yes, that's him, Mr. Burns. And Mr. Burns knows that, that he could have been Reb ZUSHA. That the heavenly court says to him, you could have been on that level. Well, I mean, maybe not Reb ZUSHA, but you could have been Mr. Burns, looking like that in spiritual terms. Are there any other possibilities? Yes. Well, of course, there's a whole spectrum over here. From there to there, you could have ended up anywhere in the spectrum of the worst possible to the greatest possible. But the question that we have to ask the heavenly court is, well, how do they know? How do they know what you could have been? Let me explain this a little bit more. Human being starts out life over here. Okay. Well, at this point in life, he's not really doing much in terms of free will. He's doing he's just a baby, and babies don't really have the choice to say, well, you know, my mommy really wants to sleep, and even though I'm hungry, I'm gonna not cry. Okay, that doesn't happen with babies. So let's fast forward a little bit in life. Let's go to a bar mitzvah. This is where we say that people do have some measure of free will, and they can start making meaningful choices between good and evil. All right. So now let's just say that this is Mr. Burns at his bar mitzvah, and Mr. Burns, and from a person's bar mitzvah, let me just carry on with my with this train of thought here. After your bar mitzvah, you can start making free choices, which will take you in this direction, or that will take you in that direction. So Mr. Burns comes to the heavenly court, and they show him this image of this over here. This is what you could have been. Okay, I'll put on my laser pointer over here and say this is what you could have been. But so Mr. Burns says, but how do you know? What did I do wrong? And they'll say to him, back there on your bar mitzvah day. On your bar mitzvah day, you went out into the parking lot with a magnifying glass and started frying ants. Okay, so you were frying ants, and that was a terrible decision, and that led you down on this path that took you down to where you were. And Mr. Burns now turns to the heavenly court and says, really? Just one choice? If I had made the right decision then not to go and burn ants, then I would have been set for life. I would have been on the blue path going all the way up to be my perfection. Really? Just one choice? Of course not. Bam. Really, what would have happened is that you have a decision matrix that happens in life that looks a little more like this. And of course, I'm grossly oversimplifying. Okay. Our path looks like this, and it's not as simple as one decision was made. So now that brings us to the problem that if we concede that the path through life is hugely complex like this, then Mr. Burns can rightfully claim, prove it. He can say to the heavenly court, you're judging me as if I could have reached this level here of, reached this level here of my greatness. But how do you know that I could have done it? Prove it. And maybe he'll say, maybe I made some bad decisions, but how do you know what I could have been if I had never made those high road choices? That path of reality that goes up through the upper bounds over there, that path that goes up through here, that never existed. It never happened. So how can you know what would have been? What the reality is that I took this path, I took this path, I took this path, and I ended up here. But how do you know what I could have been if I'd taken the high road? Right? It's a good question. So how do we answer it? Well, maybe they actually did happen. And this is where we start entering the realm of science fiction. So, for those who are not such science fiction aficionados, let me introduce you to the concept of parallel universes or multiverse theory. Okay, it's a very common plot device in science fiction, is that you have different universes which can have different physical laws, never mind different actors inside them. And a subset of the parallel universe theory is the many worlds interpretation. Okay, the many worlds interpretation is where you actually have the same actors in the same physical universe, except that something slightly different happened and that took the universe off in a different path. In other words, the same universe branches off in different directions. Okay, so now I've introduced you to the many worlds interpretation. Hold that thought there for a minute, because I'm going to introduce you to some Jewish sources that we're going to start merging into these ideas. Here is Rav Eliyahu Dessler, who is famous for his work, Michtav Me'Eliyahu, and he introduces there the concept of the free will point. This is the point that a person has of where they have meaningful decisions between good and evil. He expresses the point that not all decisions are meaningful. If you're deciding whether to have vanilla or chocolate ice cream, that is not called a meaningful decision. It doesn't change who you are or your personality. Maybe if you're choosing between the sugar-filled and the sugar-free ice cream, maybe that might be the decision between good and evil because you're looking after your body or not. But if you're choosing this route home or that route home because you think you're going to beat the traffic better, that's called an autopilot decision. It doesn't actually make any difference to the world, and it's not a meaningful decision. Only decisions that are actually between good and evil. And he introduces the concept of the battlefront, where as a person improves their spiritual level, decisions that were beyond their ability before become conquered territory. And they've raised their level to where new and more difficult decisions become their edge. And the same goes in the other direction. If a person doesn't exercise their free will muscle, then just like any other muscle, it's going to get weaker, and things that they were able to do easily before now become a struggle. Okay, so and different people, and some people might have a struggle as to whether they're going to get up in the morning or steal something, and some people might have a struggle as to when somebody speaks to them in a certain way, are they going to snap at them and be nasty and hurtful? Everyone is at their own level, and they push their level higher by continually making good decisions. Now, taking Rav Dessler's ideas of the free will point and merging that into the many worlds interpretation, let's ask this question: what if every free will decision is a node from which two worlds branch? Let that question sink in. Every free will decision is a node from which two different worlds branch out. So how does this help us? So here's our path through life once again from the bar mitzvah boy to whichever direction he's going to make. Now, every time a person makes a free will decision, what we're saying is that a whole new world is created. And you don't feel any different. You only know the path you have chosen. So as an observer, it feels to you like one world. But really, when you went through a decision and you decided, yeah, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to go to shul. Okay, that was a free will decision, but in reality, there's another universe that was created when another you decided not to get up in the morning and that created another parallel universe where you didn't get up in the morning. Okay, but you don't know any different. You only know the path that you have chosen. Somewhere in a parallel universe is a different reality where you chose differently. Okay, so now your experience of free will is real. You actually did make a decision that would take you on a certain path that would be hopefully a good path. But at the same time, God is aware of both realities. We created a bifurcated reality where you got now suddenly two universes based on your decision over here. But God was aware of both of those possibilities, and God sees both of those universes, both the you that made the good decision and the you that made the bad decision. Okay. Now, let's take that. That's just one decision. Through a lifetime, a human being goes through thousands and thousands of free will decisions. And some of them will lead you on paths that will be, that will lead you to different decisions that you wouldn't have made in the first place. And now we're taking that and multiplying it by every other human being that you encounter, because your choices can affect other people's choices, plus future generations' choices and past generations whose choices have influenced our choices that we have available to us. The overall choice map is astronomical and infinitely complex. But that's only a problem for us. It's not a problem for God, because God, as we've said before, is infinite, not limited by human deficiencies, and knows every possible path through this unbelievably astronomically complex universe with infinite worlds. But God is infinite and knows every possible path. So just to condense that back down into simple terms, our experience of free will is real. There's no problem with God having a knowledge of what path we're going to take, because we're choosing a particular path, and God is not limited by those human deficiencies and knows every possible path through the matrix. So we've got both God's omnipotence and our experience of free will being completely real. The paradox is solved. Okay, I'll take a break there for some applause. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to take a break for a second just to see some comments over here, just to make this a little more interactive. Darren says, wasn't the original intent that Adam would live forever in relationship with Hashem? Yes, indeed. That was the original intent. And now I hope that I've explained that satisfactorily over here. That there was one path where Adam did make the right decision. But there's another path where he didn't, and that's the path that we're on. Okay, Larry says, if all free will choices create a universe, why do we get credit for happening to wind up in the one where we made the good decision? Both decisions have to happen. Why do we assume that good Burns or bad Burns is the real one for a particular decision? Does each possible Burns get judged in their own universe? And the answer to that is yes. Every possible Burns gets judged in their own universe. That's exactly what I'm proposing over here. Okay, obviously we're completely in the realm of speculation. I cannot prove to you at this moment that this is what is happening, but it is something that does satisfy the question more or less. I hope, Larry, that satisfies your question. Thank you for asking it. Okay, now bonus. Remember, we had two questions. We had the free will paradox that we wanted to solve, and we also wanted to have the question about God has an infinite ability to give, but only a limited number of people to give to. So, well, I think you know where we're going to go with this now, because now in a many world scenario where every human being's free will decisions create a new node, and each decision results in a subtly different world with different choices available to every other human being, once again, the number of worlds and the number of souls thus created becomes astronomical and to all intents and purposes infinite. So now you have an infinite God who's got practically infinite souls to do good to, and that question is also satisfied at this point. Now I know there may be some people who'll nitpick and say, okay, maybe mathematically this is not a true infinity we're talking about, and I honestly don't know the math well enough to argue or to say you're wrong or to say you're right. I'm just saying that at least we're getting a lot closer to that possibility. So we got a little bit closer there. Now, all this has been wonderful speculation, but seriously now, this is all wild speculation. Is there any basis to what I'm saying, you can ask? And actually, the many worlds interpretation is a serious hypothesis in quantum mechanics. We're not just talking about science fiction over here. We're talking about serious scientists. I am not a serious scientist. I'm not even going to try to explain the quantum physics because I really don't understand it myself. But the idea of the many worlds interpretation was actually proposed first in 1957 by a gentleman called Hugh Everett and popularized by another scientist called Bryce DeWitt. Again, not science fiction writers over here. These are serious scientists. Okay. Have you ever heard of Schrodinger's cat? Here's Schrodinger's cat, right? Schrodinger's cat is a hypothetical case that Erwin Schrödinger proposed, in which a cat is placed inside a box that nobody can observe with some radioactive substance, which, based on the quantum equation, may react, may not react. If it stays inert, then the cat lives, and if it decays, then the cat dies. It's a 50-50 probability. And Schrödinger basically said that the cat is simultaneously dead and alive. Okay, now that sounds all cute as in terms of a theoretical possibility, but you know that when you open the box, you'll know either the cat will be alive or the cat will be dead. Okay, but Schrödinger in 1952 stated that these two realities that we see going here on this film are not just alternatives. They all really happen simultaneously. It seems here that no less than Erwin Schrödinger believed in this idea of the many worlds interpretation, and in the case of the quantum equation that determines whether the cat is going to live or die. In 1999 came decision theory, which was proposed by three more scientists: David Deutsch, David Wallace, and Simon Saunders. Okay, which also suggests a many worlds view of reality where the branch nodes represent decisions. Human decisions we're talking about. You make a certain decision, and that branches out into different realities. And get this, I'm quoting here from Wikipedia, so it's all perfectly true. Okay, each of the agent's future selves receives a reward that depends on the measurement result. You hear that? Now that's again for Larry, who asks about, does each possible Burns get judged in their own universe? Well, here we have it from the Deutsch-Wallace-Saunders theory. It seems like every possible branch of reality receives a certain kind of reward. Interesting idea. So that's as far as the scientists are concerned. What about the Torah? This is a very important question for me because as ostensibly a rabbi and somebody who's supposed to be making sure that everything that he does is according to the Torah, I've got to ask myself the question: is this kosher? Is this actually okay? Well, let me put your minds at rest. At the very least, before I published my books or any of these ideas, I mentioned I ran this past my rabbi and said, you know, is there anything dodgy about this? And he said, no, it's fine. At the very least, it's a plausible and mostly inoffensive proposal. But actually, in the last few days, my attention was drawn to another idea, which I must shout out to Micha Berger, who unfortunately was unable to join the presentation tonight. But Micha Berger pointed me at this very interesting interpretation from Rabbi Jack Love. So let's start in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, when Moses, the young Egyptian prince, comes out to see his Israelite brothers being under the whips of the Egyptian taskmasters, and he sees a taskmaster beating an Israelite, and Moshe looked here and there, saw that there was no man, and struck the Egyptian dead and hid him in the sand. So the simple interpretation of that verse is that Moshe looked around, saw nobody was looking, and said he can get away with it, and he killed the Egyptian. Great. However, the Midrash and Targum Yonasan say that what actually happened over here is that Moshe used prophecy to look down the generations of this Egyptian taskmaster, and he saw that this taskmaster had no descendants, had no descendants who would be righteous. There was no possibility that this taskmaster was going to have any righteous descendants. But that doesn't make sense, because if Moshe used prophecy to look at this Egyptian taskmaster's future, he would have looked and said, "Oh, this Egyptian taskmaster is going to die by my hand in about 10 seconds, and therefore he has no descendants who are going to be worthwhile." So there we go. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. How can you possibly have such a situation where he's looking to see what descendant he's going to have when he's going to be dead in the next 10 seconds? So this is where Rabbi Jack Love comes and suggests that this means that the rabbis themselves actually believed in the many worlds theory. How is this? Because if Moshe could look among all the possible futures, including the ones where he didn't kill the taskmaster, and then he can see what descendants are going to come, to come out of this taskmaster if he doesn't kill him, and then he can say, okay, all of these, this taskmaster is not going to amount to much, and so we're not going to lose anything if we kill him, and he can safely kill him. Now, this also suggests that there are limitations to free will decisions. As Rav Dessler says, we have a certain free will point, and people only have a certain amount of freedom of choice that can get them to a certain level. Okay. So I just want to take a quick break and see, there's another comment here from Darren who says, whatever path I take, I experience as me, and I am held accountable for the gap between who I was and who I could have been. Am I each manifestation of each different version of the decisions, or are they then different people? Okay, yeah, that's the kind of question that can make your head hurt until tomorrow. The way I'm proposing it is that our soul, even though our soul is bifurcating and splitting down different paths, at any given time, I can look back on the path that I've taken through life, and I can say that that I have taken these decisions. These were the decisions I made, and I can account for the fact that I am here. As for the versions of my soul that took different paths into different universes, I'm not accountable for them. That's their problem. So by the time I reach the end of my life, I get the reward that's due to me, and the version of me that took all the perfect paths to reach the highest potential that I could have reached in my life, that's going to be the me that they're going to hold me to when I get to 120, and the one that makes all the wrong decisions, I hope I never meet. Okay, so in conclusion, the free will paradox, therefore, I'm saying, can be resolved applying this many worlds theory. It is consistent, if somewhat controversial, with science, because the many world theory, of course, is not universally accepted. I'm just making it as a proposal over here. And not only is it consistent with science, but it's also consistent with Torah. Now, I actually did not know any of this science when I came and wrote my book. It was mostly through my exposure to sci-fi that I came up with these ideas myself, and I later discovered the science that backs this up. So let me just see one more question here from Larry. But of every moral choice of this person's descendants has to have choosing both right and wrong, if every moral choice has to involve right and wrong, how could Moses have seen no cases of them choosing correctly? So yeah, that's that question is basically suggesting that there's some people who are born into a certain low level that was never going to reach high, that because they started out stunted. And therefore, I guess God didn't have very high expectations of them either. That's one of those questions that it's a difficult one to answer, where they could have been. But yeah, I was never going to reach the level of Moses. But hopefully, I would also, even if I made almost every choice wrong, I wouldn't reach the level of Mr. Burns. Anyway. If this presentation has tickled your brain cells, then I think that you will enjoy my book. And it's received a lot of awards, a lot of praise. It was shortlisted for a Best Religious Fiction Award. In that, I'll draw your attention to that little gold badge over there on the cover. The American Fiction Awards is actually a non-Jewish competition. It's not a specifically Jewish thing. It was shortlisted for Best Religious Fiction, and everywhere that it's been reviewed, it's received 5 stars. I'll let you browse through that, and I won't read those all out to you. But but I think the one that I really like in this is it's hard to find well-written Jewish fantasy, and I think that's one of the things that I hope that I've added to the world, is providing some fiction to the Jewish world that's really worth reading. Okay, now it's time for the free goodies. section of the evening. I hope everyone here received an email just before the presentation that gave you some download links. Just by show of hands or yeses, did you get your download link so that you can get your free books? Yes, thank you very much. Okay, I'll take Rafael Perkel as the example. And so you've got the Persuader and the Loan Shark, which you can download, as well as a preview of ari-barak. At this point, we're going to do a lucky draw, because I said that for the people who came to this presentation, we would have a draw. Oh, and my wonderful daughter Tamari has come in over here, and I'm going to ask her to stick her hand into the bag and pick out a name, just one. Okay, I have got a name here of ari-barak. Is there an ari-barak here? Didn't come. Let me. Okay. Well, if this person did or did not make it into the meeting, well, you know what? We'll take ari-barak as the winner of this book, which I'll be sending to you shortly. And now we're going to move into question time. Okay, so once again, this is the time when I'd like people to speak up and raise your hands if you have questions. I see Anton Kramer is asking, where does Teshuvah come into this, as the other world is already there? Fantastic. Anton, I'm really happy that you asked that question, because I should have dealt with it in the presentation and I forgot. And you have alerted me to exactly the right question. Teshuvah is a shortcut. You can be right down at the bottom of the graph, having made all the wrong decisions, and Teshuvah is basically a shortcut that jumps you right up to the top, as far as and the height to which Teshuvah can take you. The true repentance can take you up as far as much as your Teshuvah is sincere and pure, and it can take you that far back up to the top of the graph. Okay, any further questions? Please raise your hands in the chat or in the and I'll unmute you so you can ask your questions. All right, Darren, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question. Didn't work, no. Okay, so I didn't manage to unmute Darren. Darren says, so all realities exist simultaneously, and Hashem knows that and knows what all the possibilities are. Sounds like he doesn't then know what I'm going to do with my free will, just that these realities will happen. Yes. Well, no, it's not that he doesn't know what you are going to do with your free will. It's more like he doesn't have a fixed definition of who you are, because you, at the moment of your free will choice, you split into two. There's one of you that makes the right decision, and one of you that makes the wrong decision. Okay, so when you say that it's that God doesn't know what decision you're going to make, he does. You're going to make both decisions, but only one of you is going to go down each path. Does that make sense? Okay, Darren, did I answer?
Yeah, it does. So it makes sense, but it doesn't seem to attend to free will. It just seems to say that all possibilities are there,
yes,
and all possibilities will happen.
That's correct. All possibilities exist, and all possibilities happen. But you're free. So from God's perspective, He's looking down at this gigantic, infinitely complex map, and He can see everything that is, will be in every universe. And from your perspective, your free will consists of choosing which path your particular version of your neshama is going to take down that path of free will. Okay, does that satisfy the question?
Okay. Okay.
You good with that? Okay. Okay.
For now.
Okay. More questions? All right. If there are no further questions, then I'm going to unmute everybody and say thank you to everyone once again. I really, really appreciate you coming. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves, and I hope you'll enjoy reading what I've written. And please continue to correspond. And oh wait, Zelig, I see Zelig has got a question. Zelig, you wanted to say something?
Unmute me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Hello,
you.
can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I just, is it similar to, there's a midrash where Moses complained to God about the Egyptians putting all the babies into
Hold on, I'm just going to,
and then,
give me a second. I'm going to mute everyone again, and I'm
okay.
going to unmute you again. Okay. Zelig, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to mention there's a similar midrash where Moses complained to God about the Egyptians using Jewish babies in building the wall, or building the Ramses and you know,
Yes, that's
those
right.
things, right?
There was a midrash that they were baking the babies into the bricks.
Yes, and then God said to him, "Don't worry, because there's no good futures for them." And then Moses still complained. He said, "Okay, we'll take one out, and I'll show you."
Right.
And then he saved one, and became the guy that tattletaled on him.
No, I think it was Micha.
For when he killed
you're right directionally speaking, but technically that baby was Micha, who became the priest to he became a priest to Avodah Zarah, and actually Moshe's own grandson became the priest to this Micha's idolatry. So that was one that didn't work out so well. Correct. How does that tie in?
Okay,
it's interesting because that that maybe is a difficulty in the interpretation, because we're saying that then Micha didn't really have that much free will, because he was always going to end up as a lowlife, and that it was better that he shouldn't have been saved. Perhaps we can say that was the extent of his free choice, that his soul was on a level that it was never going to bring good into the world, that his level of free will was on such a poor level that he was always going to tend to negativity. But again, it's difficult, because we'd love to be able to say that people have the ability at least to elevate themselves to the point where they're not like completely low life, idolatrous, nasty people. Yeah, I won't try and say I don't have that it's not a problem. It's definitely a problem, but I think it's a theological problem, whichever way you dice it. Yeah,
but just remember, I think you remember, and keep it in context, that Hashem was just using that as an example to prove his point to Moses.
Yeah, that there's a certain modicum of justice, and that the baby that was going to be baked into the brick had that God knew the long-term view of what this baby was going to turn out as. But yeah, I mean that itself is it's a problem in the idea of free will, to suggest that Micha could never have been anything worthwhile, and therefore it was not worth saving him. I'll leave that as an open question, because I don't have a good answer for it.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Rabbi.
Sure. Any further questions? Okay. Once again, I'll unmute everyone to say goodbye and thanks, and I really appreciate everyone being here tonight, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy your reading. Okay.
So
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye.
Yes.